How's it going, people? Welcome back to Watchcast. Whether you're joining us from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, wherever, thank you so much for listening. Now, today we got two pretty big movie reviews to cover in One Love, the Bob Marley movie, and Madame Web. We're going to go over both of those in the second half of this episode. To start with, we're obviously going to go through our weekly segment called This Week's Watches, where I break down everything I've seen this week and give you my ratings for those. But first up, I hope everyone has had a great week. It's been a fun week in the movie industry. We've had lots of news. We've had our Fantastic Four cast confirmed. We've had a lot of news coming out about new projects. We know that there's directors confirmed for projects like Spider-Man 4 and Shang-Chi 2 and Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars. Cameron Monaghan wants to play Cal Kestis in live action. Just lots of fun news. The Pirates of the Caribbean 6 script has finally completed, so we should be getting some updates on that movie soon. There's a lot of things coming out that, to me, are quite positive for a change, rather than coming on here and ranting about news that I'm not too happy about. So it's nice to come on here and say that it's been a good week of good movie news and just good everything in the sort of movie and television industry. But let's go straight into our first segment, as always, which is this week's watches. All I do on this segment, if you're new to the show, is I pull up my letterboxd for the week and look back at the last week and just tell you everything that I've rated. So let's run it back a week. So, I watched Rush with Chris Hemsworth and Daniel Bruhl, and I gave that one an 8. I mean, it's not the perfect racing movie ever, but it does really tell a great story, and it's something that could be really enjoyed. And I think for a 2013 movie, it's actually not too bad. It probably held up a lot better at the time, but it is what it is. I also watched Moonwalker. It was like a Michael Jackson movie that was made a few years back. I sort of watched it under the hype of the biopic that's coming out next year. But it's kind of like a storytelling through his music videos. It's quite a cool movie. I gave that one an 8 out of 10 as well. I saw X-Men Days of Future Past. I gave that one an 8. I thought it was fantastic. I've never seen that one before. I've currently been watching all the X-Men movies for the first time. Days of Future Past, fantastic, great story. I heard people tell me before I watched it that it was the Endgame before Endgame. I don't think it's that. It's not like as impactful as that movie. It's still a good movie, but it's not as amazing as something like Endgame or Infinity War. I can understand why certain people were telling me that, especially if they're like a diehard X-Men fan. Then I had Bob Marley, which I'm not going to say my rating for right now because we're going to save that for the segment of Bob Marley. I also rewatched the original Top Gun. Obviously, 9 out of 10, fantastic movie. Highly, highly recommend if you have not seen that one yet. Then I saw Superbad for the first time. This one was an absolute blast. I can see myself rewatching this one a few couple of times in my lifetime. Big up McLovin. The characters were fantastic. It was super fun. Cast was fantastic. Absolutely amazing. If you're looking for a fun comedy, definitely recommend Superbad. Then I watched the new Netflix film that released in January called Lift. Now, this one for me tells me exactly why Netflix have no grounds to follow along with their plans to put their prices up. This movie is awful. Like, so bad. I gave it a 3 out of 10. It's really bad. To explain that a bit more, the performances are incredibly weak. Even from people like Vincent D'Onofrio, I found myself laughing at how painful to watch his performance was, and that isn't one that you can just say, "Oh, it's the writing." No, his performance was pretty whack. The writing alone of this film was just an abomination. It was so poorly written and so poorly paced. You can't really appreciate anything. The action sequences at the end were kind of interesting, but nothing new or mind-blowing or anything that we haven't seen before in about 100 other Netflix movies. This one really says to me, Netflix have no idea what they want to do with their originals, and they need to find a way to do something, again, like Stranger Things, that they can build their own franchises off. Instead of these, little one-off movies that they're just throwing out to, put some A-listers on their books. That being said, they do have some good movies. They've got Extraction that's fantastic. They've got Hitman coming out in a few weeks. That looks great. Rebel Moon was a complete failure and no one is looking forward to part 2. But that's for another day. But what Netflix really need to do now is start to kind of follow what Disney did. Disney had this rocky few years for the past 4 years. Now Bob Iger's come back, and as I mentioned this last week, they're picking their safe bets. They're going Toy Story, Frozen, Zootopia, Moana, Safety Net, but it's going to make the money again, and they're going to start to profit again. What Netflix now need to be doing is looking at their shows and movies and see which ones have been successful, and then go sequel of that, spin-off of that, and build out these franchises. People are not mad at franchises being built out. I mean, maybe a little bit, but me personally, I wouldn't be mad if like Extraction had a spin-off, or if something like Cobra Kai had another spin-off when it ends this year. I think they need to be relying more on their safe bets and play more on that trump card, rather than trying to do new stuff, and it all just being rushed and crap. But yeah, that's my little Netflix rant. Back to the watches of this week. I watched Edge of Tomorrow, Tom Cruise, Emily Blunt. I gave that one a 7 out of 10. I thought it was pretty good, but I don't generally like those repetitive day movies, a bit like Groundhog Day. They just kind of begin to grate on you about halfway through, and it gets a bit annoying. But this one was done in a bit more of a creative way, so I can definitely appreciate that. And it was an enjoyable watch. I'm not going to sit there and say that I was watching it thinking this is terrible. I had fun with it. I just didn't really enjoy the concept because it's not something that I've liked in the past. Then I saw The Wolf of Wall Street for the first time. Fantastic movie. I gave this one an 8 out of 10. From what I've heard, it sounds like this one is quite overrated. It is very long, and that does not benefit it. There's a lot of scenes in here that you can kind of cut out or just shorten a little bit. But, you know, Scorsese loves his super long 3-hour epics, so we have to kind of allow him to do this. But performances-wise, fantastic. Cast-wise, this was stacked. I just found myself going like that in every scene. Because, yeah, there's so many acts in here that I just love. So maybe a little bit biased on the rating. But no, they all gave phenomenal performances. Specifically Leonardo DiCaprio, Margot Robbie, and surprisingly Jonah Hill. This is like the first time I've watched him and thought, oh, he can act. But yeah. Then I saw Batman Begins, 8 out of 10. Pretty great. Trying to finish the trilogy. I've only ever seen that one. So yeah, we'll see how the rest of the trilogy goes. I can't believe I haven't seen The Dark Knight yet. So yeah. Hopefully, when I watch it, I actually like it after all the hype that's been out for the last few years. Then, this past 2 days, I have watched through the entirety of the Planet of the Apes trilogy. So, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, War for the Planet of the Apes. I gave all of them a 9 out of 10. I get it now. I never got it before. I get it. This trilogy is one of the best trilogies of all time. Andy Serkis in a mocap suit is unmatched. You will never get someone in a mocap suit that does better things than Andy Serkis. He manages to pull off something incredible with this franchise. And I know he's not part of the new one, but I can't wait for the new one. Especially when they said that it's utilizing the same tech as the Avatar movies. Fuck yeah. So, yeah. But that is everything I watched last week. Now, as always, make sure to head over to our Instagram and send us what you've watched this week and what you rated it. I'd love to hear some recommendations from you guys, what you think's good and what you think is bad. But now we're going to move into our two main topics, which of course is One Love and Madame Web. I'm going to kick things off with One Love because it's not as painful. And then I'm going to lose my mind at the end talking about Madame Web. Okay, so One Love. Overall, I gave this one a 6 out of 10. Now, unfortunately, I wanted to come out of this one just loving it, hyping it up on here, saying how amazing it is. And there is bits in here that I'm going to say are amazing, because some bits of the movie are. For instance, the way Kingsley Ben-Adir can embody Bob Marley is one of the best biopic performances I think we've had in a long, long time. He is unrecognizable within the role. He fully just becomes Bob Marley when that camera gets rolling, and it's amazing to watch. He's got the voice on point. He's got his energy on point. Stylistically, he's on point. Everything about Bob's mannerisms, he has brought into this movie, and yeah, it's just fantastic. To see someone that was so reluctant to take on the role, which he was, because he spoke about how he didn't feel it was right for an English actor to be taking on this Jamaican role. And I highly respect that he ensured that all Jamaican actors that could have had a role in this had been contacted first. And I think that's brilliant, because he's self-aware that this character, not character, that's the wrong word, this icon needs to be represented so truthfully that he wanted to ensure that all the main options had been considered before he was an option. And I think that's fantastic. And despite him being British, he just embodies this role completely. He loses the accent. He becomes Bob Marley. It is fantastic to watch. And following along with that, Lashana Lynch in this movie is phenomenal as well. Possibly one of her best performances I've ever seen from her. I think she's amazing, and I'm so glad that she's been sort of like gradually appearing in more and more projects, because I think she's been underrated for the longest time, and this movie's really given her an opportunity and a stage and a platform to present what she can do and show people that she can do it. Unfortunately, other than the performances and the story, there isn't actually a lot else to praise about this movie. And I don't want that to come across as a negative reflection on Kingsley Ben-Adir or Lashana Lynch or the cast. A lot of my issues with this movie comes from the script. It's very slow, and the pacing is very slow, and it means that a lot of the moments are lost because the conversations to create these moments are so long and so drawn out that by the end of the conversation, you don't actually, unfortunately, care for what they're talking about, because they've been going on for it for so long, and they've been talking about stuff that is kind of irrelevant in some scenes and doesn't really get a payoff in the movie. So it's just quite frustrating. And the way the script is written and the way that the story is told, unfortunately, it's quite surface level, and you don't actually leave the theatre knowing anything about Bob that you probably didn't know about beforehand. I mean, me personally, I didn't, but that could be different for people that are unaware about Bob Marley's life. But I feel like compared to other biopics, this one wasn't as honest and open. Now, that being said, Bob Marley's family were directly involved in this movie and the creative process behind it. So it's completely understandable that they didn't want to show everything, or they didn't feel comfortable presenting everything, because they've been involved in these things, and some of the things that they may have gone through together could be quite hard to see represented again in a film. Could be quite hard for them to sit and watch through again. So I completely and respectfully understand why this movie is, to me, I'm going to consider it surface level in the biopic genre, just because it doesn't dive too deep into who Bob Marley is, or his sort of background in life. You do get into some things. I'm not saying like it's just like this is Bob Marley and he sings. It's not like I'm saying it's like that, but the movie doesn't go deep enough into Bob and who he truly was behind the stage. I think. Yeah, I mean, it definitely shows you the ups and downs that he went through. It shows you the tragedy that he had to face. But yeah, I would have liked to have just gone that a little bit further and be a bit more honest and open and a bit more expressive with this audience about who is Bob Marley and why is he this way. But yeah, that's obviously I'd say a minor nitpick. The other thing that I thought was fantastic about this movie is just the vibes of it. Like, you're cutting to scenes and you just got this like incredible reggae Bob Marley music, and everyone in the cinema is just kind of sat there swaying, bobbing their head. It's quite a nice one to watch in a packed cinema, because it kind of feels like you're sat watching a concert or a theatre show, something where Bob's music would have been quite prominent in a theatre or a concert or something like that. So it's definitely good to see this one in a packed cinema if you can. I went on opening night myself, so it was quite packed, and it was quite enjoyable to be there with that many people, just everyone sort of swaying along to these songs and just sort of just getting into the swing of the music. It was really nice to see this like collective group of strangers sat in a room, but everyone's tuned into this same music and everyone's having the same response of just swaying side to side and being fully connected to this movie in this moment. And that's something that goes completely unappreciated in movie theatres these days. Everyone in there is strangers, but you're all experiencing this movie together. And I think that's what's so powerful about cinema itself, is that you experience these moments with people you've never met before, but they have the same impact on everyone in there. And I think that's something that, yeah, it does get lost. And I think it's something that needs to be remembered. My last thing that I want to touch on is its abrupt ending. It set up Bob on stage to sing One Love, which, as we all know, is probably his most iconic song. And he goes to sing it, and then it cuts off, and you just get these like almost title cards of, unfortunately, the passing of Bob Marley, and it tells you about what happened post that and the impact that Bob left behind him, which was an incredible one. But he comes out on stage to sing the song, and it just cuts off. And it's kind of like it's been building to that moment for the movie. The movie is called One Love, and then Kingsley doesn't even get to perform One Love. So that was a bit frustrating. But other than that, I would recommend this one highly, just to watch Kingsley and Lashana's performances and to watch the story. Despite my nitpicks with it, there is a fantastic story in there. My last thing I do want to talk about on this movie is not actually with the movie itself. It is with the cinema experience. Now, despite the people in there, as I say, swaying along, experiencing these moments together, this is one of the worst movie experiences I've ever had. And it's actually the same with Madame Web. I'm going to talk about both of these now. People laughing at scenes of tragedy and dark moments, I think that is incredibly disgusting to do in a theatre and entirely disrespectful to Bob Marley and his entire family. Be that they're in the room or not, you do not laugh at the hard times and struggles that they went through. So that was incredibly just disgusting and horrible to sit in the theatre and watch and be there with those people. I just didn't want to be associated with them. I thought it was horrible. You got people in the front two rows just scrolling through their phones, literally no cares given, just sort of blinding everyone behind them. The people behind me decided to just basically talk and practically shout in my ear for the whole movie. And then you had the people also behind me to my left. No, sorry. The people to my left were just talking non-stop. People to my right just kicking the backs of the seats. And then the guy sat next to me just decided he thought it'd be really funny to just keep kicking me in the shins for the whole film. Don't know what that was about, but hey ho. And then Madame Web, the guy next to me, man, bro was eating popcorn for like 45 minutes, but every time was like a massive rustle through the metal bag, and every time he was eating just like just right next to me, and it was just so agitating to the point where I just had to elbow him, and I was like, bro, please just like either put the popcorn away or stop the slapping noises, because you're doing my head in. And then just constantly him and his wife, or him and his partner, just talking. I understand Madame Web is not like peak cinema, peak Marvel, but like have some goddamn respect, please. And on the thoughts of having respect, Sony, I have none for you. So, Madame Web, where to begin? I want to firstly say this. No disrespect to the cast and the crew, because you can tell that they have tried their best to put a Spider-Man Marvel movie together the best that they can. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen or play out in the way that you would want it to at all. And what you get left with is unfortunately one of the most mediocre movies that I think has ever been made. Nothing in this is credible. Nothing in this is memorable. Nothing in this is well curated. It's just something that manages to fail in every single category. And yeah, with a cast like Dakota Johnson, Sydney Sweeney, Isabella Merced, Celeste O'Connor, you've got Emma Roberts in here, Tahar Rahim, Adam Scott, and this is what we get? How do you fumble that cast with a Marvel movie? How? It's just like, it's actually mind-blowing how poorly this movie creates the character of Madame Web. I mean, I've got like a long list down here that I'm just going to start rolling through. So, firstly, I'm going to have to go with the editing. The editing of this movie was so poor. I don't even know who was in charge of this, but unfortunately, I don't ever want to see the Madame Web editor work on another movie again. The audio for some scenes doesn't even sync with their lips. Like, they'll be talking, but the audio will be either severely delayed or severely early. And this isn't just like a one-off scene. This happened on like multiple occasions, and it's bad. If you're releasing a blockbuster Marvel movie in 2024 and can't sync the audio to the actors' mouths, how do you expect to have a credible story in there? Like, come on, this is surface level stuff in making a movie. From a $100 fan film, I can understand if audio doesn't sync. But from a $100 million budget Marvel movie from Sony Pictures on their 100th year of making movies, you'd think 100 years in they would sync audio to actors' mouths. But clearly not. Following along that same thing, the camera work was tough. You got like certain scenes where they're just like a camera angle of someone's face, and it's just zooming in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, and it's so unnecessary. Every shot is so shaking and so chaotic that it actually makes you feel like a bit of anxiety and nausea while watching it, which I don't think is probably their intention, but yeah, it's very bad. It takes you out of so many scenes because you're like, oh, there's an intimate moment happening here, fancy camera time. It's just like odd stuff, odd decisions. That is how if someone said to me like, describe this movie in 3 words, I would just say odd creative decisions, because that's all this movie was. The next thing has to be the CGI. So from here on out, I'm going to start talking spoilers. When she falls off the bridge in the car and lands in the water and discovers that she has these powers, I think that's one of the worst CGI sequences I think I've ever seen in my life. And this, now, take this with a grain of salt. Stylistically, the web and stuff is very reminiscent of that of what we've just seen in Loki Season 2's finale. So having that 3 months ago now, and now having this utter pile of shit happen before my eyes, it's just bad. It's going to sound like I have no way to explain myself, but it's so bad there isn't words for it. Like, her hair will be flowing in the water, but her body is completely still, and the water isn't exactly rippling. So I know hair moves underwater, but like her hair is like flopping around like she's like on a speedboat underwater or something. It's just like really really bad. There's no other way to talk about it than just bad or trash. Or you just like you can't actually explain it. Yeah. Next up is performances. Now, these aren't as bad, but I have seen far better performances from everyone in this cast. I mean, when you say that Emma Roberts has a better performance in We're the Millers, that kind of sums up this movie quite nicely. She's incredibly sidelined in this. I thought she would have been in this a lot more, but she's not. So, yeah, that's that. Choreography and terrible action. Yeah. Wow. I'm actually trying to remember the action sequences. Oh yeah. Yeah. Wow. This was tough. These were the hardest bits of the movie to get through, especially the final action sequence. The final action sequence was awful. Yeah, it was. It was. The train sequence was quite interesting. Actually, it's probably the scene where I was most intrigued. It basically set the groundwork for the main plot, but it still wasn't amazing because the only intriguing scene is what they've been utilising for most of the trailers. Because shock, it's the only good scene. Then you have the diner sequence that gets repeated like 3 times. I don't even know what to say about this bit. It was bad. Like, it's another one of those just, it was bad. Dancing to Britney Spears' Toxic on a table, and then a car smashes through the diner, and they all get killed, but she comes in and reverses time and saves them all. Just like wacky, stupid, creative decisions. It's just dumb. It's just boring. It's crap. It's trash. It's garbaggio. Yeah, and that final action sequence is just terrible. Awful. I do not highly recommend this movie, as I'm sure everyone watching this is already aware. I do not recommend this movie whatsoever. I just think that Marvel as a brand, and Marvel Studios specifically, could have taken all these SSU characters and made them something incredible, but for some reason Sony said, we can do it better, which they clearly can't. And they did this. Another part of the trailers is the suits. In the main timeline of the movie, they don't wear the fucking suits. The suits are all in future, like, fast forward visions and crap. And they're in the movie, in the suits, for about that's generous, for about 30 seconds. It is honestly pathetic. They've designed these suits, which granted look pretty good if they had lenses. Don't know what I know why they didn't give them lenses now. It's not worth it. But yeah, why design these suits that look pretty good to use them for less than a minute? Just another odd creative decision. Speaking of odd creative decisions, the ending was terrible. Why are you reusing footage from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies? You've got a big enough budget that you've clearly wasted on the rest of this crap. Film some original scenes that you can put in there. Don't just rip off some scenes from Sam Raimi movies just because people then can go home and go, oh, there was a Sam Raimi scene used there. It must be connected. Yeah, her web connects them all. For about, again, 30 seconds of the movie, she's actually connected into the web. Like that. They gave her a whole backstory where she went home to where she was born, and this guy, which I don't even know if he had a name. I wasn't interested enough in learning his name. But she's there with this guy, and he's telling her, like, oh, you can be in more than one place at once, and you can do this and do that. And then she goes home and she's like, oh, I need to get to this car, but my car isn't fast enough. Well, you've just been told that your powers can take you somewhere else, so put yourself to the car. What was the point of the backstory and this empowerment of, look what your powers can do, to then not use them for the next 5 minutes and just use them once in the final battle, which was a terrible scene. Also in that backstory scene, we had the disgusting line of, when you accept responsibility, you will get powerful abilities, or something like that. It was so crap I didn't remember it. But, yeah. Why? That's the Spider-Man line. It has nothing to do with Madame Web. Why are we trying to create these awful lines for these Sony movies? Like, I'm so glad they took out the "he was in the Amazon rainforest with my mum when she was researching spiders right before she died." Thank God that wasn't in there. That might have made me give it a 0 out of 10 instead of a 1 out of 10. But yeah, just like dreadful decisions. The dialogue, as I've just mentioned, was awful. Like, there's people dying. There's a guy that dies in the second crash scene, when she's on scene as a paramedic, and she's given CPR. She's just like, "Oh no, oh no, oh no." There's no emotion behind it because she knows that the writing is crap. And if someone was dying in front of you that you know, you're not just going to sit there going, "Oh no, oh no." You're going to have genuine panic, and you're probably going to be saying something other than "oh no." Someone dying at your hands is a bit more than "oh no." Like, come on now. Like, granted, the guy who wrote this movie wrote Morbius, Power Rangers, and Gods of Egypt, so I wasn't exactly expecting interstellar level writing here. But I expected, like, intellectual, creative decisions, which this movie has none of. Last couple of things to talk about. The villain. I actually think the casting wasn't too bad. The performance wasn't good, and the writing wasn't good, and the suit was disgusting. It's one of the worst looking suits in the Spider-Verse that we've ever seen. He was basically just in there because they didn't have the rights for Spider-Man, so they put him in there instead. It's just like another odd creative decision. His CGI is probably some of the worst in the movie. It's like terribly bad, and they really do try their best to create these compelling villains, but none of them ever are. They never have a compelling arc. His power set is that he can walk barefoot and give people poison. That's what I gathered from the film. Walking barefoot doesn't really seem like a superpower, but he did it for most of the movie, so nice one, lad. The pacing, again, I think it goes without saying that with terrible writing comes terrible pacing. It was just so confusing. Things were happening and it just didn't make sense. These sort of choppy cuts and these sort of half-assed scenes that just don't really make a lot of sense. And a total abomination of just movie making. A disgusting representation of a Spider-Man character, a Spider-Man villain, that in the MCU probably could have been quite a fantastic villain. But unfortunately, in an SSU movie, is crap. I just wish Sony would realise that this SSU thing is not working, and they just need to bite the bullet and say, "Kevin, we've realised we can't do this. We want in on these Spider-Man projects, but we need your backing because we can't do it. We're crap at it. All we can make is these 10 out of 10 masterpiece animated movies about Spider-Man, but we can't construct a live-action movie in the same way." It's just weird. It's just bad, and it's embarrassing for the company. I'm not even part of the company, and I can tell it must be embarrassing for them when you've got a successful thing in the MCU. Granted, it's in a shaky time right now. However, the bad movies don't get this bad reviews. This movie feels like the movie that should have released before the Raimi trilogy, way back when. It's that bad. It could have been a movie released then. It certainly would have held up in those times. It's nothing like a leap in technology. It's just a poor excuse for a Spider-Man movie. But I think that's everything I'm going to discuss on Madame Web. 1 out of 10 for that one. So that is going to be all for this week's episode. A little bit of a shorter episode, But next week, I will be discussing Avatar: The Last Airbender, the TV show, which at the time of recording this drops tomorrow. I'm super excited to check it out. I can't wait to binge watch it and then get the episode recorded. Hopefully next week we'll be joined by Grimo. If you've been following the podcast for a while, you will know who he is, and he should be popping up again next week. But thank you all so much for watching. If you guys are looking for more from the Watchverse and Watchcast, we have clips of all our podcasts over on TikTok. Also on TikTok, we do short form videos like rankings, reviews, opinions, hot takes, anything. We do everything over on TikTok. And if you're looking for movie news and movie updates, please go ahead and follow our Instagram at the Watchverse_. We post daily news over there, and yeah, it's just a super fun community over there, and it'd be great to have listeners of the podcast come over and join us. And lastly, we are on Twitter. We're a bit inactive at the moment, but we're going to be working on that in the next couple of weeks, so make sure to drop a follow over there. If you've been listening from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, please do make sure to drop a follow or subscribe. It helps me out more than you could know. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next episode.